I'm Brian Scordato, and this is the Idea to Startup podcast brought to you by Tacklebox. We accelerate ideas into real companies through the Tacklebox membership, and we think through startup strategy every Wednesday on the Idea to Startup podcast. You're here because you're thinking about an idea, or you're ready to launch something, or you already launched something and you're running full steam ahead. We're here to help with the counterintuitive stuff. On to it. Today, we're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about mice. We're going to talk about the best business I've stumbled across in the last 5 years. And we're going to talk about standing out in a crowded market. How to create obvious, real contrast against your competitors in the mind of your customers. We meet founders tasked with this all the time. You're building in a hot or crowded space, and when it's nearly free for anyone to spin up a product and grab a megaphone and shout about how great they are, whether they've built anything impactful or not, how do you, the person building something that'll actually help people, stand out? How do you prove to your customer that you are legit, that you're uniquely qualified, willing, and motivated to help them, especially during the early days when you're starting from zero? Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a guy who keeps mice out of people's houses. And along the way, we're going to help you build a business that'll stand out. We will pull 4 counterintuitive things from our mouse fighting friends business and plop them into a nice framework you can use. And we'll shoot to get you out of here and applying that framework to your business in 20 minutes. Let's go. And if you hadn't already guessed, I know about the mouse guy because we've got mice in our house. That is tough to say out loud because ideally I'd like to live in a house that doesn't have mice, but at least I got a pod out of it. So let's hop into a time machine all the way back to 2 Thursdays ago in quiet, suburban, occasionally boring, but apparently mouse infested Connecticut. As any parents of an 18-month-old know, the only thing better than your kid being awake is your kid being asleep. It doesn't happen as often or for as long as you'd like, but every once in a while the stars align and you find yourself looking at your spouse at 8 p.m. on a Thursday, realizing you've got roughly 45 minutes of glorious freedom before you need to start your own wind down routine. For the magical 45-minute slot we'll talk about today, my wife and I decided to watch a show a friend had suggested, Sugar, on Apple TV, starring Colin Farrell and Holly from The Office. It seemed like a detective show, and we were both getting into it, talking about how impressive it is that Colin Farrell can do an American accent while acting, when we heard something. We looked at each other and both said, hopefully, dishwasher? But we knew it wasn't. A trip to the kitchen confirmed it. Mice. We heard them scurrying and clawing at the inside of our walls like they were scooping out a bagel to cut down on carbs. I jumped into action. We had a few mouse traps lying around in the basement, and I rigged them with some peanut butter. I'd barely gotten back up the stairs before I heard pop, 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 one after the next, like fireworks on the 4th of July. Now, I feel bad about the mice. I really do. But we have a kid and a dog, and mouse poop is super toxic to both. By the way, if you're wondering what Ruby did during all of this, she didn't budge from the couch. To this day, it seems that she has no idea our walls were full of more mice than the opening scene of Ratatouille. She is the best. Back to the story. A quick Google on mice made it clear that this problem wasn't going to fix itself, so my next Google search was for an exterminator near me. Dozens of results popped up, each boasting that they were the best exterminator in my town, most with a rating of 4.6 or higher, and with lots of positive reviews. Every listing looked identical. I recognized most as local branches of bigger names like Terminix or Orkin. We clicked and saw sterile landing pages that seemed to be cut and paste templates where my town name was automatically generated. I assume these were all smaller companies that had been rolled up by private equity firms and put under a big umbrella for efficiency. They each listed their services: pest control, termites, bees, ants, roaches, and on and on. The business model seemed clear. They set up traps and poison for whatever nuisance you have, then they manage those traps and that poison monthly for, well, forever. If I was the nameless, faceless, possibly heartless private equity shop who owned all of these, that sounds like a pretty good business model. My wife picked the highest rated vendor and called. It went to answering machine and we left a message. It was nearly 10 p.m. at this point, so not surprising. We were about to go to bed, but we heard more scurrying and it didn't feel like we'd made any progress, so we kept looking. Maybe 10 slots down in the Google search, I saw a listing that leapt off the page. The headline said, quote, "You'll never see a mouse again." And the sentence below said, quote, "Every listing above and below this one uses traps and poison, but those don't work. We'll actually keep mice out of your house. Book a consult now." When I clicked, the website had a giant picture of the owner of the business on the front. It was the first non stock image I'd seen in about 20 minutes. He'd been running this business for 28 years. "I live nearby," the website said, "so I don't use poison because poison ends up in the soil, which ends up in our drinking water and in our pets. And I don't use traps," it said, "because traps kill lots of mice but don't keep them from coming back. I don't want to kill animals, I just want your house to not have them." The site was old and goofy. There were low quality pictures of mice and clip art pictures of a guy scratching his head that said, "Not sure what to do," then a header that said, "We can help." But the unpolishedness of it all was refreshing. The messaging felt like a real person who cared about the results of their actions, and the call to action was striking, a huge contrast from the rest. It said, quote, "You're here because you just heard mice in your walls. That means it's late at night. Everyone else is closed, but you can't wait until working hours to book an appointment. Mice can have 7 to 14 babies every 2 weeks. So book our next slot right now. We're usually available within 24 hours." Then there was a sign up page that asked for my name, email, cell phone, and address. I put it all in and immediately got a text message from the owner's cell. It said that an invoice had been sent to my email and that the first available slot was Friday at noon. That was about 14 hours away. It also said that because both our time was valuable, a consult would be $368 and would be comprehensive. Once I paid, my slot would be booked. At the bottom of the page, there was a link to reviews of that $368 consult itself. I clicked, and people were gushing. The guy was unbelievably knowledgeable, they said, about every bit of their house. This was worth 10x the cost. Every other vendor we saw offered a free consult. This guy was really expensive, but he could come in 14 hours, and he lived in my town, and he cared about my drinking water and my dog, and he took it all seriously enough to put his face on the website. And if he did a bad job, it was clear it would affect him personally. So I paid to lock in my slot. It was 10:49 p.m., and my wife and I went to bed happy. We had momentum. Woo boy, do we have some lessons to pull out of that. Some stuff that'll change your business. And we will get to the 4 big ones after a little smooth jazz. If you've got a startup idea and a full-time job and want to test out the former before you leave the latter, come and work with us. Apply at gettacklebox.com. Over 400 startups have tested and built ideas through our program, and those businesses are now collectively worth over $1 billion. Our program helps you prioritize and execute, and our members and me and the team keep you accountable and give you feedback along the way. Come build with us at gettacklebox.com. Back to it. 1. Build your funnel to match your customers' emotions. There's an exercise we do with founders at Tacklebox called customer journey mapping. The basic idea is to get a big piece of paper and map out the steps that led your customer to your business, the first experience they have with it, and how they feel along that journey. We start by using emojis to show how customers feel at each point in that process, but as we learn more, we dive deeper into those emotions so that our product flow can reflect them properly. A big mistake lots of founders make is to assume that the journey starts at their landing page, but of course it doesn't. It starts way before that, from the moment the customer encounters the problem you're going to solve for them. So for my wife and I, the moment started the second we heard mice in the walls. And that brings us to point number 1. The more detailed you are with the customer journey of your customer, the more likely you are to stand out. This, of course, requires you to pick a customer, because the journey of someone with termites is going to be really different from the journey of someone with mice. And if you try to compromise and help people with both, the specificity of your journey messaging is going to be watered down. Our mouse friend focused on people with mice, which allowed him to realize a few key things. First, that most of the people searching would be searching at night because that's when mice are active. Second, that they had a ton of urgency. It was late, they were trying to go to sleep, and they wanted this solved. And third, that the thing they really wanted was momentum, to feel like they got the ball moving before they could go to bed. If the customer you're targeting has urgency, the feeling you need to deliver is momentum. You need to make the first step of their process blindingly easy. A customer with urgency is going to overpay for momentum, so organize the top of your funnel around that. If you go back and look at our customer journey, the mouse guy acknowledged our urgency at every step. The copy on the Google search result talked about booking a consult immediately. The landing page talked about how fast mice procreate and how other companies weren't open, but you could book a slot with them anytime. And the pricing hit on urgency too. Charging a lot to get started is a feature. It conveys that the process has started with someone serious about fixing your problem. A free consult scheduled at some point shows no urgency. An expensive consult scheduled immediately does. So, how does this work for the business you're starting? The same way. Let's say you're building an AI tool that helps people schedule meetings. Step one is thinking about how people are going to find you. And sure, there are going to be random one off conversions. Maybe you get press or someone with a big following tweets about your service or whatever. Fine. In my mind, that's all noise and should be ignored. It's stuff you don't have the luxury of paying attention to early on. When you've got condensed resources, the only people you can focus on building a flow for are the repeatable, reliable ones, the ones under your control. You need to optimize for people with urgency to solve the problem. So, if 60% of your customers are going to search for AI driven scheduling software because maybe they're fitness coaches and they can't afford a virtual assistant, but Calendly doesn't work either because of the nuances of their clients. Maybe some are virtual, they meet some in a downtown gym, others in an uptown gym, some at home, and on and on. What are they going to search for? And what was the straw that broke the camel's back and caused the search in the first place? And how can you message directly towards that? What do all the other search results say, and how can you play off those, recognizing you'll be read third or fourth or fifth or ninth in that sequence? How can you make it feel like you see your customer, whereas every other listing is just talking about their own company? What does momentum look like in a sentence? What is your version of the mouse guy saying, these other companies all do X, but we do Y, and you need Y now, so let's get started. This all brings us to big point number 2. 2. To create contrast, make a feature fold. My old boss used to encourage all the early stage companies we work with to do what he called a feature fold. You'd take a piece of paper and fold it in half the long way so your paper had 2 big long columns. Then on one side, you would write all the features all of your competitors had. Then on the other, you'd write out the features you planned to have. The idea was to make sure that there was no overlap. If your competitors all offer a certain service as table stakes, it's logical to assume that you've got to offer that too. But the best thing you can do is to not offer it. To assume that customers that want that feature are happy with the competitor's offering, because it's unlikely you can win on that feature or a combination of all the features your competitors offer anyway. You don't want to play the game with all the competition. You want to play the game with none. So, strategically, the best thing you can do is offer nothing that your competitors do, then find the customers that need something else. This leads you to the most compelling marketing message on earth. Everyone thinks you solve X problem with Y feature, but they are wrong. To actually solve Y the way you want it solved, you have to do Z. It's a bit counterintuitive, but it is true. If you can write that messaging, people will convert. Our mouse friend did this in his Google ad. Every other company on the Google result uses traps and poison, he said. Those don't work for people that want mice gone permanently, and they're bad for the environment and for your town. The wink and nod is, if it feels like throwing poison and traps at a problem indefinitely doesn't seem like a great solution, trust your instincts. It's not. Not offering what your competitors offer is also an enormous favor to your customers. Your customers are burdened with a decision. They're looking at a bunch of service providers and trying to figure out which one to pick. The best thing you can do is to help them make that decision. If you are in situation X and you believe Y, we can help you. But if you're in another situation or you don't believe Y, we can't. Go with the competitors. This creates a favorable decision for you. Everyone else does one thing, we do something else, encourages your customer to decide if they want the other thing or your thing. But in the back of their mind, they know that if they choose the other thing, they're just setting themselves up to have to make another set of decisions. Which of all of these companies that all do the same thing should they choose? But if they decide that your unique approach is best, they are done making decisions. By offering a different feature, you cut down on the number of decisions your customer has to make. And humans hate decisions. We will avoid them at any cost. Saving your customers a decision will get you more business. Mouse Guy saying, everyone does traps and poison and only I don't, makes me decide between traps and poison and not traps and poison. This led me to not traps and poison, and possibly subconsciously because I knew if I decided to go the poison route, I would have to make a whole new set of decisions around which exterminator I would choose. So it made working with this guy actually pretty easy. Mouseman wins again. 3. Take yourself seriously. This one is a bit of an epidemic amongst founders. It seems like a good idea to beat your competitors on price. If you use the feature fold we talked about above, you'll feel like you absolutely have to beat your competitor on price because you aren't offering as many features as they are. But when a customer is new to your business, they'll take your cues as to what type of business you are. If you're cheaper than the competition, you'll attract customers interested in paying the least amount of money they possibly can to get a job done. These are horrible customers. If price is the variable they're choosing you on, you're in a race to the bottom. Someone will price below you and you'll lose all your business. Never build anything for people that add up input costs to make a decision. Also, when you have a lower price, people assume your product isn't as good. They take your cue. Even when founders know this, they still like the idea of charging less because they think it lets them off the hook. If you make a mistake but didn't charge a lot for it, no one's going to be mad, right? This obviously sounds silly when you say it out loud, but it's the core thinking for most founders. If you charge a lot, you're on the hook to deliver a lot. And who's to say you can even do that? Charging less than the competition is a way of telling people to not take you too seriously because you aren't taking yourself all that seriously. It is also a way to guarantee you don't survive. When you're a startup or a new business, you'll need your first set of customers to pay a big margin. It'll likely be the biggest margin you'll ever make because theoretically, these are the customers that can't get their niche hard problem solved well by anyone else. You've decided to focus on it, and solving it creates a ton of value. Then, as you grow, you'll move to the right of the adoption curve and you'll charge less because the problem you solve will be less painful and urgent than it was for your first customers. Early on, you've got to put yourself on the hook to attract the customers willing to pay you a big margin, because that margin is going to fund your business and allow you to move to the right of that adoption curve. So pick a specific customer and take yourself seriously. Charge a lot to solve a hard problem and then bust your ass to solve it. Narrow your scope to make sure you can do it. Don't compromise on price, compromise on customer. Narrow that range. Fewer customers, more value. For our calendar example, start with the weird outlier niches that have lots of qualifiers for scheduling and will get enormous value from those nuances being solved. The mouse guy takes himself seriously, and that is ridiculously attractive as a potential customer. He won't meet with you unless you pay a big chunk of money up front because his time is valuable and he's only interested in people likely to work with him, the ones that already buy into what he's about. He doesn't want to get there and then have to convince you. He wants there to be a 90% chance you're going to work with him after the consult, even before he shows up. He wants to speak to the people already listening. Promise a lot, charge a lot, over-deliver. That is how you build a business. 4. The things other people stink at. I'm going to do another podcast on the Mouse Guy's product and stack because I think it is just about as brilliant as his marketing. I was going to squeeze it into this episode, but the guy deserves 2 pods. But I will end with something he said to me while we were walking around my house checking for mouse entry points. He had such a ridiculous amount of enthusiasm for his job that I had to ask, how did he find it? How did he decide that protecting people's houses from mice was his calling? Well, that's an interesting one, he said, while lying on his back next to the foundation of my house, trying to mimic the point of view of a mouse. I've always felt that the best way to figure out what you want to do in life isn't to think about what you're best at or what'll make you the most money or even what you get most excited about. I've always thought the best way to figure it out was to look at what other people are weirdly terrible at, the things that you just can't believe they can't do well or don't want to do at all. For me, I always wanted to buy a house, he said. And once I bought it, I wanted to know how everything in it worked, how the HVAC worked and the plumbing and electricity. It was by far the biggest purchase of my life, and every bit of it was fascinating. It's this living, breathing thing, and if you get it working right, you can save enormous amounts of money and keep your family safe and grow your investment and work on it yourself. And I just couldn't believe that no one else was as interested in this as I was. That people just live in this thing they spent probably 10x more money on than anything else in their life and just don't care. So I knew when stuff happened, the HVAC breaks or whatever, I could help because I understood it all. Then I looked for the stuff people hated the most and the stuff that professional services were doing the worst job at. And that was the rodent stuff. Everyone hates it. They won't look in the basement because they're afraid of what they'll see. But I love it. It's a big puzzle. How do we make this house impenetrable so everyone is safe, the animals and the people? And I don't understand how that isn't everyone's goal. For another example of this, look at my neighbor, he continued. He's a crazy successful accountant, and he says the same thing. He can't understand how so many people are so bad at understanding money, but it's so obvious to him, and so he does it professionally. And that's the advice I give to everyone. Don't look for what you're great at, because that'll always have a bunch of emotions attached to it. Look at what other people are terrible at and hate, and you just can't fathom why. And that is your thing. He hopped up off the ground and said, "Do you like that, Ivy? Because mice use it like a highway up to your second floor. Should probably chop it down unless you're trying to do a Wrigley Field sort of thing." Then he went on acting like he hadn't just said one of the more profound things I'd heard. Don't look for what you're good at. Look for what other people are inexplicably bad at. Something that comes easy to you but hard to everyone else. And do that. The end. Back to today. We're well on our way to the mouse guy shoring up our house. And we finished sugar. And I'll be honest, I think I was more upset about sugar than the whole mouse fiasco. I mean, if you've seen it, you know. That could have been the worst twist in television history. And for all the feral heads out there, this wasn't about him. He acted his little butt off. I blame his agent. He should have run away from this script faster than the mice do when I turn on the lights in my laundry room. Although, at least that'll get fixed. To recap, the lessons from our mouse friend are impeccable. First, understand exactly what your customer does to find you and how they feel in that moment. Then build the product that is your onboarding funnel as a reaction to their emotions. If they're feeling a ton of urgency, make sure your onboarding meets them where they are and gives them momentum. Your messaging and flow should be a reaction to what's happening to your customer that moment. And people always overpay for momentum. Second, to get the type of specificity that allows you to build an efficient funnel, create a feature fold. Don't do anything your competitors do. Only do things that they don't. And market them directly to the customer that needs them and don't compromise. Only go for the people that are already in on the joke. Third, take yourself seriously. Charge a lot. Over-deliver. Solve a specific problem. Narrow your customer to increase the value you can provide. And fourth, to find out what you should be doing in the first place, think about what's hard for other people but easy for you. What are you shocked that other people can't do? That is where you start. And if you want to keep mice out of your house, don't ask Ruby to help. She's so indifferent to mice running on the floor right in front of her, I'm wondering if she's on their side. She is the best. This was the Idea to Startup podcast brought to you by Tacklebox. If you've got a startup idea and a full-time job, head to gettacklebox.com and apply. We'll get back to you in 72 hours and we can be working together by the weekend. Have a great week.